Welcome to the Cincy Postcast. I'm your host, Kevin Wallace, and before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you about our sponsor, Streetside Brewery, one of the best Cincinnati brewery you will find around. They are doing some awesome stuff over in the Columbia Tusculum neighborhood over on the east side of Cincinnati. A really, really great place. You gotta check them out. There's always a ton of stuff happening over at the tap room, including coming up this week, you've got a big sports weekend over at Streetside. You've got the Queen City Fulham watch party on August 24th. They're watching Fulham take on Leicester City. Sunday morning, you've got Formula One watch party for the Dutch Grand Prix. That's kicking off at 9 a.m. They have live music Saturday night from 7 to 10. They got music again on Sunday night from 3 to 6. It is an awesome place to go check them out. And when you are over there checking out all there is to do and all the events there, tell them we sent you. Tell them the Cincy Postcast sent you over there, and they will knock $1 off of each beer you are buying over at the tap room. Really great deal for listeners of the Postcast. So please go check them out, Streetside Brewery, or check them out, wherever you're buying beer at your next place. And enjoy their beers. You will not find a bad one. I promise you that. Thank you again to Streetside for sponsoring this episode. And on today's episode, well, in part one, we look around the league. What did everybody else do for transfers, huh? How does the competition stack up in MLS as FC Cincinnati looks to finish out the MLS campaign and bring on MLS Cup playoffs? How is the rest of the competition shaping up? In part two, Tom Bogert laid out a pretty interesting story about how the transfer window came together and in some ways didn't come together for FC Cincinnati. We read through it in an episode of Soccer Blog Book Club and break down exactly what was going on there. We wrap it up in part three, answering a lot of Patreon questions, some really, really funny ones in here. It's a good time. You put it all together, you got yourselves one heck of a postcast. And joining me to talk about all of that and more, joined by two gentlemen who have had some time to think and reflect, joined by the Chief, joined by Grayson. Grayson, how does a soccerless weekend find you? As far as the FC is concerned, there's plenty of soccer going on around the world this weekend, but
it finds me very well.
Nice.
I've been going to farmers markets. Today I went on a bike ride and went to
go you.
I don't know if people know about this place. It's a Streetside Brewery.
I think I've heard of them.
I took a bike ride there and was able to get a dollar off of every beer that I ordered with by mentioning the post. It was very nice.
Wow.
Did you pull the move where you said like, "Oh, I heard about this podcast"?
Oh, of course I did.
Okay.
No, of course I said I heard that if I mention like the post podcast, I get $1 off beer.
Nice.
Yeah. Of course I said that.
Not to put him on the spot, did the bartender know what you were talking
about?
Wow,
yes.
That's good.
Yes, she did.
Nice.
Not to assume somebody's pronouns, but yeah, she did.
I would live in mortal fear of doing that and then somebody saying, "Oh yeah, no, it's okay, Chief." Like knowing that like who I was based on voice or something like that. I would die. I'd be like, you know what? I'll pay full price. It's okay.
It's so here's the funny part of it. So like we went and my wife and I were biking today and we decided to stop at Streetside and she was like excited. She was like, "Oh, I get to use the post code." And then she forgot to do it. So I had to go up and
forgot.
I had to go up and do it.
That's so good.
Yeah.
I don't know if I told this story. If I did, I apologize. But when I went into Cincy shirts a little while ago to get a shirt, I ended up getting a oh shoot, one of our designs. I forget which one. Bought it for my dad actually, and as I was checking out, the guy was like, "Oh, the Post, I love these guys. You know, they made Opie. They have an Opie design that is so cool." I just had to just stare at him with a blank face, like, "Yeah, man, I like some of their stuff too." The conversation kept going, and I couldn't admit it. But the more he talked about it, the more awkward it would have been to then come and say, "Oh yeah, I do the podcast."
Just sort of whisper to him, "I'm Batman."
So last night, we went up to the tennis tournament, and I had a friend of ours from out of town come into town last night, and we took him up to the tennis tournament, and then when we came back, to our house or whatever, we're just like hanging out, having a glass of wine, and my wife is like, "Well, he's got a podcast." And my friend is
outed you.
Yeah, and she's like, "Yeah, it's about FCC," and he's like, "The Federal Communications Commission." And she's like, "No,
really into regulation. This Chevron decision ruined my week."
We're like, "No, FC Cincinnati," and he's like, "Why would anybody listen to you?" Like, he's like, "What's your?" He's like, so he's immediately like, "What's your credibility? Like, you didn't play for the team.
Yeah,
I'm like, "Yeah, I know.
I don't know what they're doing here
100%.
That's so funny. There probably was a point in time where like the net neutrality fight could have actually gotten you, like a podcast about the FCC could have sustained itself for a little bit there.
He was like, I guess like Stephen A. Smith, like no one should listen to him either, but he's.
Yeah, I mean that's half the punditry
but
class.
He's like interesting, and I'm like, yeah, I guess. like I don't know. Like, yeah, no one should listen.
Right, no,
yeah,
I agree with everything. I agree with everything being said. No one should listen to a word I have to say. No one should take anything seriously that I say. This is
like
it's all profoundly stupid.
I'm like, it's fun. It's fun for me. Sometimes I hope it's fun for other people a little bit more often.
Oh no, we love it. Even
the funny thing is, he's a golf guy, and I was like, well, yeah, have you heard of like no laying up? And he's like, no.
Oh,
I was like, oh, well, like if you'd heard of them,
this is the
we've had
analogy.
One of those guys on our show. But since you haven't heard of them, I guess let's just chat about like Kamala.
Well, no, the perfect the perfect ending to this story will be eventually when he, you talk to him. He's like, "Oh, hey, when you mentioned that you had a podcast?" I'm like, "Oh yeah," you think he started to listen. No, that other podcast you told me about, No Laying Up. I've really gotten into them, and they're great.
Fair.
Yeah. No, they're fantastic. Like I hope you made a fan there.
Man, I'm just glad that anybody bothers downloading it. The fact that we've got 12 listeners is awesome.
Oh, it's funny because like earlier in the night because he had never been to like a tennis tournament before. And he was like asking questions that like I don't have the answers to.
Oh, good.
Because like I'm not like a tennis guy either. He was like, well, what about like the lower ranked tennis players? He's like, is it like, do they like do that full time or is it like Major League Soccer? I'm like, what do you mean? Is it like Major League Soccer? He's like, well, are they making like $60,000 a year or whatever? I'm like,
sir.
There's a couple of teenagers making that much money.
I'm like, I don't know, man.
This would have been your opportunity right here to say, look, let me educate you about the designated player rule, okay?
I wrote a whole article about this. You should check this out.
I'm going to send the link to your phone. You can just read it later. It's okay.
Oh man, no, I'm glad we're back doing this in the normal way, and we don't have the awkwardness of us trying to figure out how Discord works, because that was how the last podcast went. The live recording of the podcast. I always find calling any podcast live silly. I did it with our New York one as well, just because like if it happens in person, it's live. But no, thank you to everybody who listened to the Discord episode. That was a really good time. And like I said, like as soon as there are games back, I think that is something that we can try to utilize a little bit more. I think it went well. Yeah, and appreciated everybody tuning in.
You thought that podcast went well?
I mean, there's nothing better than just capturing the in-person, in-moment reaction when it comes to creating rational thoughts that are fun to listen to later on.
So sorry,
you didn't have like multiple people that we like invited to speak seem like they were on the verge of tears
or refusing to speak after being invited to speak. No, I think on a technical level, I accomplished everything that we were setting out to accomplish.
On a content level,
that was a different story.
I didn't listen to it, so I have no idea how it went. I was like, I'm going to pass on this one.
So let that just exist in the moment is what I'm going to do.
Somebody on Twitter said their meltdown on the live show was embarrassing. So
that was on Reddit. That wasn't on Twitter.
True. It was on Reddit until I tweeted it from the post account.
Also, it was on Reddit when like in a post where everyone was just like, I'm illiterate. I'm illiterate. I'm illiterate.
That's every post on Reddit.
Illiterate.
I don't understand why this happens with every single thing that the post has ever written that gets posted to the FC Cincinnati subreddit is immediately met by what I can only assume are 12 to 15 8-year-olds that didn't fully comprehend all of the words that were on the page. It's the strangest thing. It was
the fandom is in a tough place right now.
It's true. It's true.
Is it?
Yeah, it is, because
half of the fan base is in a tough spot.
Well, that's what I say when the fan base is in a tough spot, where it's like right now there's a lot of people feeling things, and there's a lot of people processing feelings. There's a lot of people just trying to figure out what they're feeling, and that's positive, that's negative, and it causes things to happen, and it causes reactions to happen. I'm not going to fault anyone, specifically not even myself, for any reaction that has happened over the course of the last 5 to 6 calendar days. It's been a roller coaster, to say the least. So if you found yourself reading an article that the Post published or anything else, and it just didn't hit for you because of the mental state you were in, it's okay. This is me giving you permission.
Is the mental state having low IQ?
Look, soccer makes us all dumber, okay? That's just the way the sport is.
I finally got fed up of those comments on Reddit, and I had to quote a large passage of the article back to somebody, like bluntly asking them, are you sure you comprehended the point of this article? And after that, the comments seemed to have turned in the other direction. But man, that was something else. Yeah, Chief, I think that's where we're going to go with part one here, is sort of processing the window, not in the moment, not live, after all the 9 a.m. announcements have been announced. This is the team, at least until, September 13th. This is the team that we have going forward. But before we talk about FC Cincinnati, I do think it would be beneficial, because FC Cincinnati does not play in a vacuum. The goal is not to achieve a certain point total. The goal is to win. And in order to win, they will have to play other teams. And FC Cincinnati, as one of the better teams in MLS, their competition is clearly defined as being the other good teams in MLS. So I think it is worthwhile to start our analysis of the summer transfer window with how the other teams did. What do the other teams look like? Where do they stand? What did they do? Did they do nothing? Did they sell all their best players away? What does it look like with the other teams? Chief, it is my understanding you have Matt Doyle's latest standing by. I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. So Matt Doyle posted a breakdown of where everybody went during the summer transfer window, what the moves were in, what the moves were out. I thought it would be a good way to level set where FC Cincinnati ended up by just going through what other teams did this window. We're not going to do every team because we're not in competition with every team. I think we all agree, and I think that we've had some internal conversations about this, that we think FC Cincinnati is probably one of, at this point, a top 7, top 8 team in MLS. Certainly the standings, but
should be thinking about itself in that way.
Should be thinking about itself in that way. Where you're talking about top 8 teams in MLS, you're talking about the teams that will have a home field advantage for the first best of 3 series in the MLS Cup playoffs.
Thank you for phrasing that the correct, annoying way.
Or the teams that like realistically view themselves as like among the real contenders for MLS Cup.
So with that in mind, I'm just going to go through the first, I would say those top teams in MLS in Doyle's article. Inter Miami, who is the points per game leader, their only major move this summer window was acquiring a center back, David Martinez, on a loan with a purchase option. There is rumblings that Diego Gomez may be on the move to Brighton. That hasn't happened yet. It's certainly been reported that it's going to happen, but they haven't said if that's an immediate move this January, or a move with a loan back. But only a center back for Miami. But I think that's significant because really where this FC Cincinnati team exploited Miami was that they were old and slow on the back line. And getting someone who's younger and a little more dynamic in there as a center back, I think was their biggest need, and makes them significantly less likely to have a performance like we saw losing 6-1 to the FC, would be my take on that.
So I agree in the abstract. What kills me about this move is David Martinez, the guy that they signed. He's 26 years old. He's on loan from River Plate, right? He has made a whopping 8 appearances combined the last 2 years. That's not good. Like, I don't understand where the idea is that this guy is good.
Sure. Like, here's a counterpoint.
Okay, please.
Miami has maintained a supporter shield level pace without Lionel Messi for much of the season.
Right. Absolutely.
The argument for why the FC's recent form should not be alarming is that they haven't had Lucho Acosta for a lot of that time.
Right.
Miami can keep supporter shield pace without Messi. We are one of the worst teams in the league, it seems, without Acosta. Where's the silver lining there?
I think Kevin's point is more the idea of they made an addition, but like it's obviously from River Plate's a pretty damn good club in South America.
Yeah, but they may get Messi again. Is my point.
Right. Okay.
So he would be
that's my point. My point is like, yeah, they didn't add like a world beater.
Right.
But they may get Messi again.
Right. It's also
they've been doing how they've been doing without Messi.
Right.
They may get Messi again.
I don't disagree. I also think it is entirely possible, and this is maybe my own ridiculousness here. I almost say it's a 50-50 chance they get Messi this year. He seems very injured.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And that's been the whole thing with Miami all year, is that there are a lot of aging stars on Miami.
But what if he shows up ever?
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's a very good team.
He's not on season-ending injury.
Right. And that would be financially a poor decision for them to do that.
Sure, yeah. But what if he comes...
If he comes back, yes, obviously. And without Messi and with Suarez, who has been very good this year as well, they are, yes, still one of the best teams in the league. I just don't want people to look at, oh my God, and Miami added a center back. My argument is there are better center backs in USL. And if you had told me Miami added a mediocre USL center back, nobody would view them differently than what they did before the window.
Yeah, but their center backs were awful. Like there was nowhere to go but up for that team's roster, at least in terms of the back line.
Miami is how they are. Versus when we play them, they will likely have Alba and potentially like Suarez and Messi at a certain point.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's just it. Like I'm not saying like that turns the tide of the 6-1 or whatever.
Right.
But that's where Miami sits.
Absolutely.
So Los Angeles Football Club, LAFC.
What do they
next? They signed, they sold Mamadou Fall. They brought in a midfielder, Lewis O'Brien, on loan, and a man you may have heard of, Arsenal legend, Chelsea legend, French legend, Olivier Giroud, on as a DP. I think Olivier Giroud is going to dominate this league. He's still international world class, even at, I think he's 37 years old, but he is the exact type of striker that will absolutely feast on MLS defenses. This is a great window for them. The only thing that you can be happy about as a non-LAFC fan is that they didn't get the Griezmann deal across the line, which there was strong rumors that was going to happen. LAFC is a problem at this point now. I think
the thing about Giroud is, like, one, as you said, he had a great year last year from Milan. Like his year last year from Milan would be like among like the greatest American seasons in Europe.
Yes.
Ever.
Yes.
So there's no reason to believe that he's like
past it or anything.
Past it, right? And also the role that he's going to be asked to play at LAFC is not a role that like one, it's a role that fits in MLS clubs, right? In two, it's not going to be a role that like is outside of his abilities. It's not going to be that much different than what he was asked to do at Milan.
No.
Yeah.
And when you think about like old European players who were bad, you think about like Pirlo, you think about Gerrard,
Lampard.
They were asked to do like what they were expected to do in MLS is very different from what like Giroud will be expected to do. Like LAFC is going to be able to generate opportunities, and Giroud is just going to be, knocking around in the box, and just receiving service. And
I mean,
and putting it away.
Yeah, if you look at
how the guy's going to be like 2 goals a game,
right? Yeah. Well, if you look at Kai Kamara, FC Cincinnati legend Kai Kamara, is like 39 years old, and he does the same thing, just sits up top. He's been very good for LAFC. He has helped them quite a bit this year. This is quite a bit of an upgrade.
Yeah, Giroud is exponentially better than Kai Kamara.
Right.
Like,
but you think about like Wondolowski in MLS, right? Like it's like world class Wondolowski.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exactly, I was arguing this before the season started. It was exactly the player, if I had unlimited budget and resources, would be the player that I would want to see playing for FC Cincinnati this year.
This has been a this has been a pro Olivier Giroud podcast since the beginning.
Yes.
Since the beginning. We've compared Vasquez to Giroud. We've talked about how unappreciated he is as a player because he's not like a messy type that builds up and necessarily creates. But in MLS, if you got a guy who just is a lethal, like, final ball receiver, that guy sets records.
Yeah.
Like, that guy wins championships.
And you're already talking about inserting him into a lineup that, Cherundolo
scores
loves.
a lot of goals. Yeah.
It's up tempo. They generate a lot of chances going forward. They possess the ball really, really well. And now they've got a target man that they can just feed off that possession over and over again. Their partners out on the West Coast, LA Galaxy, who I think have been kind of surprising this year. I didn't have them pegged to be this good, this turnaround to happen this fast. Sign another person you may or may not have heard of before, Marco Royce, on a TAM deal. Cool.
The benefits of the big market. Yes.
Right. No, they're already a very good team, and adding this talent just feels like an embarrassment of riches for them at this point. But like that's when that is where the market effect is real. And it's one thing I really think this league needs to address at some point, if there's still going to be a salary cap in this league, that there needs to be something that compensates or resets the competitive playing field for not DPs wanting to sign in big markets, but the ability of markets in LA and Miami to get players on these TAM and below market value deals, because these players want to come to America and are okay as long as it's one of these one of these coastal big elite markets.
Yeah. So two things on that. One is there is a mechanism for that. It's that Charlotte had Royce's discovery rights. Right. So Galaxy had to ship like 400K or whatever.
That doesn't make it even though. Like it has to be increased exponentially.
I agree. And the other thing is like with Royce, so like Royce to Galaxy, I may eat these words. It scares me less than Giroud to LAFC because I'm not because I think that Royce overlaps with like other players at Galaxy, so it's not as like purely additive as Giroud is to LAFC. I think Galaxy is going to like pull guys off. Like it's gonna be more of like it's gonna be certainly like a net benefit to Galaxy, but there's gonna be like more rotational aspects to it.
Sort of like a different framing of what you just said there, where I agree with it, is that I have an easier time seeing Giroud's skill set directly be 1-for-1, where he comes in and everything he does well will work perfectly in MLS. I have more questions about Marco Royce.
Yeah. Like if you put Giroud on like FC Cincinnati, right? Like you just put him up top.
Easy.
We roll out the sword formation.
Yeah.
And we just scored like 7, 8, 9 goals a game. like it's purely additive. But if you put Royce in FC Cincinnati, there is like, it helps, right? Like it makes the team better for sure. But you have to reconfigure the lineup a little bit more, and there's more of a like other players become less less productive because they get like less time, right?
Yeah, that putting him on FC Cincinnati is kind of the perfect analogy, because you'd immediately be trying to figure
Marco
out
Royce on a TAM deal. No, don't get me wrong.
Right.
Don't get me wrong.
You'd be immediately trying to figure out how does he fit with Lucho Acosta. And I think the similar question...
You can only play 11 players.
Right. The similar question is going to be asked with Ricky Puig, which is like... he has worked so well in the center of that midfield. Are you really going to move Royce out wide at 35 years old to be running up and down that much? Probably not. But then you're disrupting your own MVP candidate to make room for an aging star that we'll see how his legs work after all this travel at MLS, right? So,
and he'll help them for sure. And they're already very good.
Yes, they are ahead of us in the Supporters Shield standings.
It just doesn't feel as frightening to me as Giroud to LAFC.
The other thing about this LA Galaxy team is
it's all on like a scale, right?
This Galaxy team is young. They're really, really young everywhere. And I don't know, if you're bringing in an aging star from Europe, I'd always rather bring in the striker or the backline player. Bringing in the aging midfielder, it feels like a little bit of a bigger gamble. But I think Royce is really, really good. I still think
he's really, really good.
I think he's still got it.
Yep, I agree.
So a particular note to us. Next in the points per game rankings, and I've skipped us. We would have been just ahead of LA Galaxy. But I'm going down in order here. Our friends to the north, the Columbus Crew, who have been very active recently. They sold Aiden Morris. That happened a couple of weeks ago. He was sold to Middlesbrough in the championship. They made $4 million from that. So they got a GAM conversion. I think they got the max GAM conversion for that, if my math is right.
Yeah, they should.
And then they used some of that GAM to trade for a wingback, DeJuan Jones, and an attacking midfielder, Ezekiel Jackson. I believe those were interleague trades. They were within MLS. They signed an attacking midfielder, Dylan Chambos, and they brought in a right wing back, Andres Herrera, on loan. My read on this is this team doesn't miss. They just don't miss, and it's infuriating as an FC Cincinnati fan. And what this team has done successfully is they have restocked the depth pool, especially in the midfield, with players that you can bring on as a match goes on that are fresh legs, that aren't massive downgrades for the players that they're starting. This is now a very, very deep team that has the ability to change the way it attacks you with late game substitutions. And they still have probably the most dynamic offensive player in MLS not named Lucho Acosta in Cucho Hernandez. So I hate to say this. This was they probably had the best summer window in MLS, and that sucks.
If you're curious about whether the Crew had the best window in MLS, look at who their subs are in any given game. Like, they bring in like dangerous players off the bench.
Yeah.
And like, like Christian Ramirez. We've said this so many times on this podcast, but like when they brought in Christian Ramirez off the bench in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, when we bring in offensive subs, what do we do? Like, do we bring in players that change the game the way Christian Ramirez does as a sub? They had like Mo Farsi as a sub. They had I forget his name, Matan.
Yeah.
The U22 player they have. He was also a sub in a game recently, They bring in like game-changing players off the bench. And it's frustrating, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
They have two DPs.
They could have added a third.
But they have two DPs. They have 40 goal contributions in MLS play between them. Goals and assists.
Wild.
And And it's why that team doesn't worry about going down 2 goals.
Yeah,
they don't worry.
Like, and they don't worry if like one of their DPs isn't available. Like they're still dangerous. And we have, we had a, like, we'll talk about this later, but like we have people talk about like, what could you do in like the summer window to like change like the fact of the team that FC like lives and dies with Lucho Acosta. And it's like, yeah, bring in like another DP who is as good.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that, but like Rossi, who is the number 2 guy in for the Crew, has like 9 goals and 10 assists in MLS.
Yeah.
If we had anybody else on the team that had that, we would be worried less about
Acosta's feet.
about Acosta's health. Yeah.
Kevin, what do you make of this idea that of the teams we've listed so far, Crew actually went and spent GAM to get players from within the league that were clear depth pieces versus going shopping outside the league?
Are the Crew a 3DP team, or are they a U22 model?
I mean, as of right now, they're a 2DP
it was published.
U22 model.
It was published. I don't know
I don't know if they randomly assigned a player the DP status, but they only have 2 designated players.
Yeah.
Of consequence. So if they're the 3DP model, I'm shocked. Yeah, Chief, I do think it is weird.
Columbus Crew said they're a DP model.
So they must have put somebody in there just for the financial accounting purposes.
Or
they must have Nagby as a DP.
Oh, that maybe they did that. Okay.
Yeah.
So Chief, yeah, I think there's a couple of things here. One, I do think it's weird that there weren't more trades within the league generally. It feels like it's very quiet on the intra-league market, and I do wonder if that is addressed this offseason. It was one of the proposed changes last winter. I could see it going through this winter. Maybe why we didn't see as much movement is basically letting teams offer GAM and TAM, but also letting teams offer transfer fees to other players or to other teams for their players, which I think would be helpful in MLS. It would also be helpful just like if you're looking at it as a fan of the league, quote unquote, to help establish markets for players. So when Europe is looking at a Miles Robinson or somebody who maybe has a transfer or 2 under their belt, that it looks like, oh, okay, these American teams were valuing him at $1 million, $2 million for these transfers. We can place our valuation in that place. But I'll tell you maybe the most disappointing thing about the Columbus Crew transfer window for me is 2 things. One, that Wilfred Nancy is still there.
Yeah.
Was really hoping he would have gone either to the U.S. men's national team or another club in Europe. Maybe, hopefully, somebody in France or somebody that likes Nancy fires their manager pretty early into the European season and panic hires him. But the other is, at least we forget, pretty early on this season, there's a pretty big shakeup in the Crew front office with Bezbachenko leaving and a couple of other high-profile assistants there leaving. It's a little annoying that the new guys did a pretty good job on paper. We'll see how these pan out.
There's got to be a lag.
Yeah,
Right.
There's got to be, like, these are guys they've been looking at that the old Crew was probably scouting as well. Like, this... I'm hoping that what this is this is the last. It's like with Apple when Steve Jobs kicked, that like there were still a couple of cool products in the pipeline, and then they start doing $40,000 VR headsets that nobody wants, and it's very clear the magic has left the building a little bit.
Right. Let's hope that's the case.
Yeah.
Or like when you elect a new president, like the new president gets the benefit of the previous president's like economic cycle. Right.
Always.
Yeah.
I'm always saying this. Real Salt Lake, incredibly busy during the transfer window. Interesting because it feels like this was a team that started out hot and hasn't had as much of the staying power or had as much of the at least as much of the press as a lot of these other teams had. They sold their winger Andres Gomez for $11 million. They sold another winger, Fidel Barajas, for $4 million. But then they came in, they bought a DP number 10, Diogo Goncalves, for $3 million. Bought another Gonçalves, sure. I'm an American. I can't read. Bought wingers Dominic Marzek, sure, $1.5 million. Lislan Brook. Signed an attacker, Benji Michael, claimed a defender off waivers. This is a roster that has been remade a little bit.
Yeah.
If I were an RSL fan, I would be disappointed that we're selling players for $15 million in transfer fee and only $3 million of that is invested back into the new DP. This goes along with the thing I got lit up for online, and, you know, I'm going to stand by my take, that I don't think MLS teams should be signing DPs at $3 million anymore. At least not ones that aren't like, you know, this is for paper or for financial balancing reasons. Like, if you're going to go out, I think that the expectation in this league now should be, it should be high 7 figures, low 8 figures minimum should be where teams should be targeting for DPs. This guy may be great, but if I was an RSL fan, I'd be asking where the money went and why that wasn't reinvested back into the club. When you're selling good players, Andres Gomez was a good player, and you're not putting that money back into the next good player.
I agree with that. I think that RSL probably didn't spend what they could have. I think they took their profits on that deal.
Yeah.
I like that they, though, brought in a real, like a true DP. Even if it's like a lower ambition DP, they brought in a true DP to replace the guy that they sold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's possible they sold Gomez to...
I think Gomez was U22. I think they just had like the open DP spot.
Yeah. But I think they sold him to help the MVP argument for Arango, because that was part of the knock against Arango, is he had such a good supporting cast.
Well, the other thing to think about with RSL is like, yeah, we spent $7 million on Bupenza. RSL spent, I think, like 4 on Arango.
Who would you rather had? Yeah.
I would spend 4 to get Arango. Like,
I mean,
we don't need to.
I mean, hell, we almost spent 4 to get Bupenza to go away.
we'll talk. I guess we'll talk about like so, that kind of deal later.
Real quick, because this is, I think, the list falls off after this. So this is the last one that I'm going to go into. And if you want to read the rest of the transfers, you can go on Matt Doyle's articles on MLS Soccer, Major League Soccer.com. The last one of the teams that I consider to be our competition at this point, for now, is the New York Red Bulls, who sold Frankie Amaya, our old friend Frankie, to Toluca, and brought in a DP central midfielder, Felipe Carballo, on loan. This would be another window where if I was a Red Bulls fan, I would feel whelmed by this. I don't know.
They've needed a really good striker ever since Thierry Henry left, since Bradley Wright Phillips left, and they've never replaced it. So very weird decisions.
That's what that's what they've been missing forever. They're a team that struggles to score goals in big matches. You know, you wonder. You wonder how they're going to enjoy that come playoff time. And we might find out, because it would not surprise me if we see this team come playoff time again. It feels like our fates are consistently tied to this other team.
I mean, it's fine. It's fine for Red Bulls to, like, you know, score a bunch of goals on like FC Cincinnati. But like eventually they're going to have to like go against a team that defends.
Oh, jeez.
That doesn't give up like 1 goal per 0.4 XG. And so like, yeah, like I'd be frustrated if I was a New York Red Bulls fan that they don't do that. Like you're in like, you know, like the greatest city in the world, right? where you can
Allegedly.
see like
Harrison, New Jersey.
where you can see, like you can just take a train into Manhattan and see like a show.
Spoiler.
And then like they don't spend any money. Like they don't get like game changers.
No.
And like you can have like your system all you want. But like get the DPs, right? Like you can have like your system
and then add Thierry Henry to it.
Yes,
Right,
exactly.
Of all the teams, like, I know they're putting their finger on the scale for Miami in this league. It shocks me that there isn't more pressure put on the Red Bulls ownership group
And
to, like,
NYCFC.
to do something where it's like, will you, for the love of Christ, bring in a star to
Right.
engage this city? It shouldn't be this hard to recruit someone to play in New York City. It just shouldn't.
They have one of the nicer stadiums, allegedly, in the league. Like, there's no. It's so
It's not. Just pay the money.
Yeah.
weird. Right.
Yeah, it's not even our facilities. Just pay. The sales pitch is easy, especially from players that are European based. There's a flight to virtually every major European city multiple times per day out of multiple airports in this town. You're only a 6-7 hour plane ride from being home. You don't have to do the overnight shit like the rest of us do when you're going to Europe. You can fly in the morning. It should not be this hard to convince a top European talent to come play here. And I don't think it would be if this team opened the wallet and paid somebody.
Yeah.
I will tell you that there's a non-zero set of players that FC Cincinnati has tried to recruit in its history who would have gone to New York Red Bull if offered the same money.
Yeah.
How much does
I'm not saying everybody. I'm just
Right,
saying a
right,
non-zero set. I'm not saying who it would have been, but I am saying that if Red Bulls had put out the amount of money that FC Cincinnati had put out, like they would be much better because they would have like all the Red Bull players and all whatever,
Yeah.
plus like the guys that FC tried to sign.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Does the New York Red Bull, is it the Red Bull branding and organization, does that hold them back as well? I think it does in terms of marketing.
People love Red Bull.
Oh, okay.
I think the only reason it would hold anyone back.
What is the fucking guy, the driver guy, Verstappen?
Oh yeah, Max Verstappen.
Yeah,
Can he play striker?
Like
No, he
people-
can't because race
like
car
the-
drivers aren't athletes. So
People that are into race car driving love Verstappen, even though he is like totally uncharismatic and hateable. They just like a guy that wins.
and that name is fun to say, Verstappen. There's ain't no stopping Max Verstappen.
I'm sure we're saying it wrong too, which is great.
Whatever. So that all brings us, I think, to the FC.
Yeah.
And our transfer window. So, as you listening to this probably are very well aware, if you aren't aware, God, do I envy the hole you've been hiding in.
Should we do like a break, like an ad break?
We could do a break
this?
here. We could do a break here. That was part 1. Part 2, we'll look at the FCC transfer window. Part 3, we'll answer some Patreon questions.
Yeah,
and get out of the episode. I love this. Okay, Grayson.
Sorry, Chief.
This is how we program on the fly. We'll do that. We'll come back after this break. We'll talk FCC transfer window. Beautiful, beautiful transition. Before we head on over to that next part of the episode, I do want to tell you about our friends over at Cincy Shirts, our dear, dear friends here at the Postcast. Believe it or not, our very first sponsor from way, way back when. And guess what? Not only are they good friends of ours, not only have they been doing FC Cincinnati gear from USL year 1, but these guys are also doing postcast merch. That is right. We have designs up on the website right now. Search Cincy Postcast. You can find our gear on Cincy Shirts. There's also links in the description of this show. But if you don't like our stuff, and you know what? If you don't tell me about it, but that's fine. Okay. You can buy anything else off of the Cincy Shirts website or in store using promo code ThePostCincy. All one word, all caps. That will knock 10% off of your entire order. That works on Cincy Postcast shirts themselves. And you can check them out in person. They are in Oakley Hyde Park. They are in Fort Mitchell, and they are also in Loveland. You can print any shirt on demand. I know that from experience. I've been able to do it. Walk in there, ask them to make a design, any size shirt, any design. It's really, really cool setup to do it in person there in any of their 3 locations. So again, a huge thank you to Cincy Shirts for sponsoring this episode. And thank you, dear listener, for using that promo code. Again, ThePostCincy, all one word, all caps, 10% off your next order. All right, back to the episode.
I didn't realize we were going to go so long on the MLS part.
We are back. And yeah, Chief, I didn't think we'd go that long either for the MLS bit, but we did. But
this is why nobody does an MLS podcast that's worth listening to, because that was probably the most boring 40 minutes of content we've produced so far.
And we just talked about like 5 teams. There's so many other teams that had probably better windows that we'll never know about.
If you're a fan of another team and you listen to this,
what are you doing?
This is not for you.
Please complain to us that we didn't talk about your team.
Please, I beg you.
We will talk about your team if you complain.
That is true.
And you retweet the show. If you do that, we'll talk about your team. That's a promise. I won't say for how long, but you'll get a mention. We'll do it. So the FC, this window closes, and the FC's business this window. The early on signing was Chidozie Awazim Cheeto. The midway through the window, closer to the end, there is a contract termination by Major League Soccer for forward Aaron Bupenza, the designated player. And then at the 11th hour, live while we were recording the transfer episode, news comes in that they have brought in Nicholas Giacchini on loan.
Joachini.
Sure.
We are going to say Joachini.
We'll get our guy's name right.
Maybe we should just maybe he shouldn't have a first name. He should just be Joachini.
Joachini. Yeah.
Like Joseph Aquini.
Fine.
Yeah. He's Joe Aquini on this podcast. So they brought in Joe on loan from Como in Serie B and a half.
Sir, they're Serie A.
All right. So he played for Como when it was Serie B.
Currently Serie A.
Serie As of A July now. 1st, they're a Serie A club.
They were promoted last year. Joe Aquini previously had played for St. Louis last year, where he was a 10-goal scorer on the expansion team. Prior to that, he had played for or had been under contract with Orlando City, had not really played for Orlando City, was left unprotected in the expansion draft, had a decent season with St. Louis, and parlayed that into a $2 million transfer to Como in the January window last year. So, Cheeto, we've already talked about. I don't think we need to rehash what his background is on this. So, a center back that we're guessing at this point is pretty close to a max TAM, if not a max TAM center back that was a 1-for-1 salary swap.
High TAM, I think.
High TAM. We're gonna say high TAM. Closer to a 1-for-1 salary swap with Matt Miazga.
Yep.
And Joe Aquini takes over as a designated player, which is more of an accounting trick than anything else, because without going deep into the rules, you can make anyone a designated player that it makes over the maximum salary budget charge, which this year is about $670,000. Any player that is over that is either a designated player, or if they are less than $1 million over that number, you can use TAM or GAM to buy the contract down. But if you don't have the TAM or GAM to buy the contract down, or you don't want to use it in this way, any player making even $1 over that max salary budget charge can be classified as a designated player. So
players that we have had as like purely budget designated players have included Alan Cruz and Yuya Kubo.
I was going to say on this current team, Miles Robinson, Matt Miazga, Sergio Santos,
Buka,
Yedlin,
Corey Baird
could all be designated players.
Yeah.
If you were doing this trick with them. So yes.
Yeah. And so because MLS roster rules and salary rules, because MLS salaries are so opaque, it's hard to know why in particular it made sense to make Joe Aquini the designated player versus making one of those other players the designated player. Either way, he will occupy a DP slot, but he is not a designated player in anything other than just the accounting trick, which I believe led Grayson to declare a moratorium in the Discord on referring to him as a designated player. I'm good with that moratorium because I think it does, and as we talk more about this window, I think it does a disservice to Joe Aquini to put the designated player label on him, because the designated player label carries with it expectations of how you should perform, and you expect that your designated players are supposed to be game changers. If you're building a team of Avengers, your designated players have to be the ones that have the superpowers. You can't get Hawkeye a designated player contract or Black Widow. It doesn't work that way.
Unless you got Thor on like a U22.
A max TAM deal, yeah. Peter Parker on the U22.
Yeah,
hey, nice.
I think like my point with just ignoring that Nico is a DP is it's just not fair to the player. Like the question is like the ultimate question is, does this player coming in help the team? And thinking about him as like, is he worth a DP spot? That doesn't help us evaluate him as whether he's like a good signing or helps the team.
Yeah.
He's only a DP for accounting purposes, and because like, as we'll explore in a moment, they weren't able to bring in like a quote unquote true DP.
Yeah.
So I do think that like the question is, does he help us at the striker position? And I think that the answer is he might.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, but let's move on from this.
Yeah, just the only other thing I want to point out too, the reason why it's definitely not worth harping on his position is he's on loan, and that loan ends after this year, and there is no purchase option. So his designation doesn't carry any weight when looking at this roster going forward. If he was on a 4-year contract, I think we would seriously need to consider him as a DP and factor that in. But yeah.
Or if the window was still open, because the window being closed now means there is, unless you want to go dumpster dive in the out of contract pool when the European window closes, there is no functional way to use this DP spot for the remainder of the year. It's not like he is blocking a better deal from happening now that the window is closed.
Yeah, and that's, I think, exactly right. Like,
depending on how you feel about Sergio Ramos,
this is him versus I think, like, unless we hear something different,
yeah,
this is like bringing this guy in versus bringing nobody in. So the question is like, is he better than nobody? It's not, is he better than like your ideal DP striker?
Or even a Josh Sargent. Right.
Well, we'll talk. Yes. We'll talk about that,
which we should talk about now. So, I think, Chief, it is impossible to think about this window and where it stands now, without factoring in where it could have stood should have one of these targets FC Cincinnati had actually landed. And We have to give full credit and full props here to Tom Bogert for putting this story together. Came out a couple of days ago on GiveMeSport.com, his new outlet that he's working for there.
Gimme.
GiveMeSport.com.
Let me have it.
He lays out the list here. Incredible list of names, I will say. I'll let Chief debate whether these would be worth it, but we were looking at potential breaking of MLS transfer records with a couple of these guys. The names were, of course, Weston McKennie, Josh Sargent, and Jermaine Berterame. Okay. So where we could read through the story. Everybody,
let's read through the story.
Okay,
I think read through the story.
Okay, I'll read through it here. FC Cincinnati summer transfer window sped by in a blur. The club went through a roller coaster of emotions in the month-long window, going through extensive negotiations with 3 high-profile targets, bringing in a high-level center back and a last-minute deal to add an MLS-proven forward. By the time the buzzer hit and the window closed, Cincy still brought in 2 key starters: Nigeria international center Chidozie Awazim on a permanent deal from Boa Vista, and American center forward Nico Gioacchini on loan from Como.
I do want to pause right there. I want to pause right there. I don't believe, or I hope sincerely, that the plan is not for Gioacchini to be a locked-on starter. I don't think that would be smart. And the way that this transfer saga goes through this article, to me, undercuts the idea that he is going to be handed a starting position. We'll get into it as we get to the Gioacchini part, but I view Gioacchini as a depth piece. And if you're expecting him to start and be productive, I think you're going to be very disappointed as a locked on start the remaining 9 games this season. And we can talk about why that is, but when they say starter with Gioacchini, that immediately was like, I don't know about that, how I feel about that.
I mean, I would love for him to win a starting job, in the sense that I would love for him to prove to be a better player than like the other forwards, right? Because you want, anytime you can sign somebody who's better than the other options at their position, that's a good time. I don't see any reason in his track record to believe that he's anything more than like in the mix with the players that we have at striker. And so it feels, and you know, we could be proven wrong. Everything could end up another way, but it feels like Gioacchini is like somebody who is in the striker pool, not somebody who is like, oh, we've signed like 2 starters, right?
Yeah.
And if he's just given a starter job, that seems silly to me. I just assume that's not the case. I assume. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, there's a lot of insider info in this story that Bogert has. I would assume he is getting the starter line from the same source that told him how the negotiations went.
If that's the case,
maybe. If that's the case,
if that's the case, fine. I would love to know, and I would love to hear the explanation, because the numbers simply do not bear out that Gioacchini is just better than what this team already has. And it would be one thing if it was somebody that they had been targeting all along. We'll get to this, but it very much seems like he was the last guy at the bar at 2 a.m. when they needed to go home with somebody.
Yeah.
Let's
keep going.
I want to say one thing on that, right? Like, Gioacchini was not productive in France at the 1st or 2nd division level. He was not productive in Orlando, and he was not productive at Como. He did score 10 goals last year at St. Louis. But if that's enough to be like, this guy is a locked-on starter, I have questions. If it's enough to be like, oh, he might be able to help us, and if he earns starter minutes, those are available.
Yeah.
I'm on board.
Yeah, I just think if you assume two strikers, Kubo, I think, is the obvious starter. He could easily be better than Kelsey, Santos, and Baird. So, okay, I'm going to keep reading. Gioacchini technically occupies a designated player slot, though
also literally.
Technically is the best kind of correct here.
That's I'm sorry, but
yes.
like technically is silly.
Well, I'm sorry. I thought
he literally does.
We put a moratorium on this conversation.
In an agreement with your moratorium.
No, it's not. He literally does. Don't write technically. He literally does.
Though mostly, not entirely, mostly for salary cap accounting purposes. They began their summer planning to fill that slot with 3 huge targets. Well, probably just one target. They moved through 3, but that's another point. First, U.S. men's national team star Weston McKennie. FC Cincinnati began their pursuit of the Juventus midfielder McKennie months before the transfer window opened, sources say. There were visits in Italy. McKennie came to Cincy's facilities this summer and spent time with the higher-ups in the club. They pushed hard, but ultimately the deal didn't quite come together. McKennie still remains at Juventus, though manager Thiago Motta has been public that he is among players he is not in his plans and needs to find a new club before the transfer window closes.
That has changed a little bit since Bogert published this article, and you wonder how much of that is spin.
Yeah,
to try and increase his value over in Europe. It's interesting. Get through the next part of this, and then I'll offer sort of a comment on that.
Well,
he's tied in very heavily to the next person, and I think there's a common thread about why the two of them aren't coming here.
Okay, I was going to say that is the last note on McKennie specifically before this changes. So, okay. All the while, since they had their eyes on another U.S. men's national team star, Norwich City forward Josh Sargent. Cincinnati bid somewhere in the region of $20 million for Sargent, sources say. Norwich demanded north of $25 million. It wouldn't budge on that valuation with almost a month left in the European transfer window. An agreement on personal terms wouldn't have been an issue with the player comfortable with joining Cincy and both sides aligned on expectations. Sources indicate this pursuit isn't over, one to keep in mind, and that Cincy could still work on a winter deal for Sargent. St. Louis City have his MLS priority rights and would need to be compensated. Sargent could be among the faces of the league if he were to come, especially ahead of the 2026 World Cup. I'm going to read this last paragraph and then we'll go into it. Particularly in the cases of Sargent and McKennie, since he were hampered by the summer transfer window in MLS, closing on August 14th, while the global window remains open until the end of the month. Norwich and Juventus can hold to their valuations in the hope that another club comes in before the end of the window. The cadence of transfer windows as prices go down, the closer to the deadline it gets. It was also a negative factor in Charlotte's FC's pursuit of Giovanni Lo Cielo, I don't know, and Miguel Almiron. Lo Celso.
I mean, this is a real problem for MLS specifically.
Yeah.
Like, that is a real problem that MLS teams have to make their best and final offer when European teams still have weeks to find something better. And it puts MLS teams in a difficult position of either having to grossly overbid to get a deal done in some cases, or pass up on the deal. And if there's one thing the league could do right now to fix that, it's they have to align their transfer window in the summer with the European transfer window. I know that pushes things out later in terms of when players are getting added, but they already have the roster freeze on September 13th anyway. So they're clearly fine with players getting added until that point. Just align the fucking windows. This would solve this problem immediately.
Also, barely later because you have the Leagues Cup that goes until a week before the European window closes.
Right. The other thing, too, is it hurts in the personal negotiations with these players. The teams might agree to a fee, but if that player thinks a better team will come in for them, it makes things hard, too. So, yeah, it's tricky all around.
Also, with the something I think we need to mention with Josh Sargent is Taylor Twellman reported something like FCC was not the team that like took him like down to the deadline.
Right. Like when they couldn't make the deal happen.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how to take that, but that's something I think we need to mention.
Was the interpretation that it was a different MLS team negotiating with Sargent, or that FCC was negotiating with a different player?
My read on that is that FC Cincinnati moved on at some point in the window, and it probably got around to league sources that Sargent was looking to get back, was okay with a move back, and that another team then came in to kick the tires. And it wouldn't shock me if that was St. Louis, honestly.
Well, kind of has to be.
And it, like we might have been the best offer for him still, but based on where you're going next, Chief, I think it is clear that like they did not take Sargent to the end of the window. Right.
So before we get to like the next part of this,
talk about this.
All right. 2 U.S. men's national team players. I have to believe, or I'm curious, the Weston McKennie thing and the Sargent thing, I'm curious how eager, because one of the things that broke on the exact same day as the transfer window was Mauricio Pochettino being named manager of the national team. I am insatiably curious if you went back and you had another 2 weeks to go in the window, if some of these negotiations wouldn't have just been cut off immediately by Sargent and McKennie out of a desire to stay in Europe now that they have a Europe-based manager and a manager that is a European, has managed in the highest European leagues. When Berhalter was the manager, there was clearly no penalty for being in MLS. Jurgen Klinsmann had thoughts about players in MLS. We don't know what Poch's thoughts are about players in MLS. I would be very curious to find out if some of these players that we were talking to, even if the deadline was further, might have said, you know what, I'm going to stay European based until things shake out on the national team. Because at least in the case of, McKennie and Sargent, they appear to be top starters on the national team, but Sargent isn't. It isn't like Sargent's locked on in his national team.
Sargent hasn't scored for the national team in like 3 years.
Yeah. So that's number one. Number two, the other thing that I got lit up online for this, and I didn't make my point artfully, probably because again, it's Twitter, and I was not in a great headspace when this was going on. To me, this pursuit of these 2 players in particular, it gets into this point of ambition and what the meaning of ambition is.
Yes.
So is it ambitious to chase Josh Sargent and Weston McKennie? The answer is yes, that's ambitious. I have my own thoughts on whether or not Americans should be making this kind of money to play soccer in the United States. Not here, not the time for it. If we revisit this in the winter, maybe. But my bigger point is this idea that if you are going to go swimming in this level of this deep water of the international transfer market, you have to come willing to pay what's being asked. And if the difference between getting a deal across the line and not getting a deal across the line is, in this case, let's just say for the sake of argument, FC was offering 20 million and Norwich wanted 25 million. I don't know what the numbers are. It's probably even more than that. But if 5 million that's too rich for my blood, I can't do that deal, you're shopping in the wrong market. Because that's where these big high-end players are. Those types of differences are rounding errors to the club's that are doing business in this end of the world soccer market. If you are going to have like a hard stop on what you can offer, you need to be playing, I would think, a little further down the line in the $10 to $15 million range, where if a club holds out for 18 or 19, you're still within your budget on that point. And to me, what sort of was the hard takeaway from this is that, yeah, like you were ambitious, but you came away with nothing. And ambition has to be married to results. Otherwise, it becomes delusion, I think.
I agree that ambition needs to be married to results. I'm not ready to like write off the club's ambition after one like failed window.
No, not at all.
But,
not at all.
Yeah, I'm not saying you are. But I do have questions. Like one question is like, okay, if you're ready to like bid $20 million plus salary for Josh Sargent, Memphis Depay is like a free agent. He's clearly a better player than Josh Sargent right now. I'm sorry. Like we all watched the knockout game between the US and Netherlands in the World Cup in 22.
There's also there's no guarantee Memphis even wants to come to MLS.
See,
though.
that's
sure.
the thing.
Yeah.
Right.
But he wasn't in the article.
Right.
Like it wasn't in the article that they like offered like, $15 million a year from Memphis to come to MLS.
I mean, to be fair, they could have called his people and he would have said no at any price to Ohio. I'm not doing it.
Fine.
And then
Fine. I would love to know that if they did that. Like that would be a wonderful thing to know.
I wonder if there's a discovery rights question as well there, but yeah.
Yeah, but there's other free agents who were better than like Josh Sargent and Weston McKennie.
Yeah.
we do love American players on this team.
Yeah.
We love American players.
But I wonder, like, if we're willing to spend, $15 million or $20 million for these American players, what are we willing to spend for like better free agents? Because like Giroud went to LAFC as a free agent. Or moving on from like free agents, Columbus got Cucho for $10 million, got Rossi for like $4 million. RSL got Chicho for like, I don't know, $5 or $6 million.
Yeah.
Are there not players around the world who are as good as Chicho or Cucho?
Well,
for less than $20+ million in transfer fee plus like whatever in salary.
I'm sure
because again, if like, yeah, you're like, oh, we have Lucho. Would it be wonderful to have like another player who was like at least close to Lucho?
Well, let's keep reading because I think
RSL has one.
I think that question
Crew
could be
have two.
answered here. Well, RSL also sold one of theirs, so
sure, fine, but we can't find a Chicho.
Well, let me read it.
We can't find a Cucho. We can't find a Rossi.
I am going to read this sentence and answer your question. FC Cincinnati triggered the $15 million release clause for CF Monterrey forward German Berterame, sources say. There's your guy. The club agreed to terms.
That's the only guy?
The club agreed to terms with the player. The player indicated he was ready to join. Since he began preparing a press release for the announcement, blocking out stadium time for introductory photos and planning logistics, only for the player to ultimately back out for family reasons. At $15 million, Berterame would have been among the most expensive signings in league history. The Portland Timbers pushed hard to sign him over the winter, but the player opted to stay in Mexico. He is Argentinian. He was within about a couple of months of residency requirement for Mexican citizenship and therefore eligible to be called up to the Mexican national team. He has since earned that citizenship or that eligibility, whatever the case is, which is why the move made more sense in the summer. That is not spelled out in the article, just giving a little context. The 25-year-old would have been viewed among the best forwards in the league if a deal got over the line. With about a week left in the transfer window, the contract of DP forward Aaron Bupenza was terminated by the league. That open DP spot is what would have been used to sign McKinney, Sargent, or Betarame. Bupenza occupying the spot wouldn't have been an issue, and a solution would have been found earlier if needed. But this is the key piece. By the time the deal for Betarame was off, just 48 hours were left in the window. Wanting to capitalize on the strong squad with another addition without hamstringing themselves for the future, since he pursued a loan for Gioacchini, within 24 hours, a deal materialized to sign the American forward from Italian side Como.
Yeah, we went running home to another American.
But that tells me that I don't know how long the Berterame deal was in place. Maybe it was only in place for one day. Maybe it was in place for 3 weeks. But by the time it was called off, there was but 48 hours left in the transfer window.
So a couple of things. Number one, genuinely impressive that they were that close to a deal with Berterame nothing leaked.
No one knew.
That there was nothing leaked on the Mexican side. There was certainly nothing leaked on the US side.
Yep.
They run a tight fucking ship down at TQL Stadium and at Mercy Health Training Complex. If they were making, because that's the point in the plans where you're involving people that are photographers, you're involving people that are stadium people, and nobody let that slip out. That is a job well done to the culture they've built inside that building, that everyone, loose lips sink ships. Number two, I think there's been some chatter out there that Berterame might be a target this window. If I was Chris Albright, I would tell him to lose my fucking phone number forever after leaving me to hang out to dry 48 hours prior to the close of the window.
That's tough.
Number three, I will preface this by saying I think Chris Albright is an incredible general manager. I do not want anyone else as the general manager of this club. I hope that everything that has happened to this window is a learning exercise that makes Chris Albright a better general manager. If you are 48 hours to the end of the window and a guy gets cold feet, you need to fly to Mexico and say, you need to tell me what it's going to take to get this across the line. Whether that's briefcases of cash to family members, whether that's a promise of we will lean on any member of the federal government to get people into this country that you want here, whether that's signing one of your buddies to a supplemental roster deal like we did with Yamil Assad, whatever it is, you can't let that deal fall apart 48 hours before the window ends. Like, that's one where it's just like, maybe there was nothing to be done. Maybe there was genuinely nothing to be done. Even if there's nothing to be done, go do the impossible and get it across the line. If you're that close, you've got to close that deal in that moment.
If it does get done in the winter, it feels like you fucked up.
Yeah. It means you could have done it in the summer.
I think that's true of the Sargent deal too. But
I agree. But so I think it's like, I know people got like real weepy and mad about people who wanted the team to sign players in the window. You just got owned by the fact that the team tried to sign players and didn't.
It's like, no, I want them to sign the players. I don't give a shit about the almost.
And I think Chris Albright's a great GM as well. I think the team has done a great job. I just want them to do as good or a better job than Columbus. And Columbus was able to find Chicho Arango on $10 million. Not Chicho Arango. Cucho Hernandez.
Hey.
But Chicho Arango, another example, right? These are players who were available on cheaper deals than what was reported that FC struck out on in this window.
I will
that
agree.
Would have helped the team.
I will agree. However, we have a co-host on this show that said earlier this show, signing any player like that, any player like that is low ambition and beneath our club.
But I said several episodes ago, I just want somebody who is as good as Cucho or better.
Yeah.
And I would love to see that. Like, I would love to see Lucho playing with somebody who is as good as Cucho.
It's tough.
So anyway,
okay, good.
So hold on. With no, go ahead.
No, to me, it's tough, and part of the reason why it's like it hit me a little bit this week, and when this news broke and when this story broke, is that what makes this difficult is that. So you read with the Josh Sargent thing, they're going to try again this upcoming window. And I saw some reactions online and some people posting on Reddit, Facebook, even in the Discord of, it's okay. They tried. This is ambition. This is great. This winter is going to be awesome. Like, this winter is going to be awesome. Maybe. But I think the tough part, and this might be where I show my age a little bit here, is that, like, I have lived through multiple sports franchises that I like that missed their window. They just missed it. The one that comes to mind immediately is the Cincinnati Reds from the early 2010s, where they had a window where they were one of the best teams in baseball, and they never put it over the top. They were close. They were probably the best team in the National League in 2012. They lose to the San Francisco Giants in the playoffs. Giants go on to win the World Series. They're good the next year, but they don't make the additions they need to get into the postseason. And the window closed on the Reds. And it is going to be a very, very long time before the Cincinnati Reds win another World Series. The Bengals right now are in a window. They've got Joe Burrow. And Jamar Chase is holding out on this team right now. You hope that they get something done, but like, windows in sports don't last forever. And when they close, there is no promise of when the next one opens back up again. And FC Cincinnati right now has a generational MLS player in Lucho Acosta, who is just not getting younger. He's just not. And you hope that he has skills that will lead him to have a prime for another 4 or 5 years. You don't know. You just don't know what the situation year to year. It's a salary cap league. You could have horrendous injury luck the next year, and you could have major players that are gone for the majority of the season. In a league like MLS, or in any league that's a salary cap league, when it's your window, you have got to maximize your window. And so that Tom Bogert article, to me, and maybe I'm a sicko, it didn't make me feel better that the team was trying. It made me feel worse that we were so close to getting a generational type player in here, or a huge piece that's like an over the top piece to push this club over the line. And we ended up with Joe Aquini, who may be a great kid. He may play well. He may thrive in this system. The numbers suggest he's probably very similar to Corey Baird in terms of what his productivity level is over the course of his career. And that's what was hard about this, was that if you think this FC Cincinnati team has a chance to win an MLS Cup in the next year or so, or 2 years, if the window is open now, you, by waiting till the winter window, it's one fewer MLS Cup playoff run you will make with all of the roster tools you have at your disposal deployed. And that's tough for me.
What I worry about is so like 2019, right? Like, we came into the league, we were terrible.
Understatement.
The crew also missed the playoffs that year. Okay. The crew have signed 3 designated players since 2019. They signed Zella Rayon, they signed Cucho Hernandez, and they signed Diego Rossi. They've won 2 MLS Cups. They're in the semifinals for the Leagues Cup.
They were in CONCACAF Champions League final.
They were in CONCACAF final. They are looking to, probably finish near the top of Supporter Shield this year. They're definitely gonna be one of the favorites for MLS Cup. They didn't sign a big DP this window, but they signed a bunch of players. They added depth. But the fact that they nailed 3 DPs in a row, I find that interesting. FC Cincinnati has we have Obi, who was barely a DP.
But nailed, he was phenomenal.
Yeah, and has been really good. But the other DP that Albright signed was Pupenza.
Not so great.
Not nailed on. And then the third is
more nailed in the face, but
the third is Gioacchini.
But no.
Yeah, I know.
If you're doing that, then Darlington Nagbe is a DP for Crew.
Okay, fine, but
he's pretty good though.
But I would take Darlington Nagbe as a DP right now. I would take Zelarayan. I would take Rossi. We haven't done any of those. Albright signed OB on a $3 million deal at a barely DP contract. I'm not. I think I love our team. What I worry about is that the ownership is willing to spend money if they see a window. And they saw a window, but they saw the window get taken away by injuries. So we ended up with, Gioacchini.
I don't see that. I think that we were a Mexican forward.
Is there not a Cucho anywhere in the world?
They had him.
Cucho or Rossi.
But that's the problem. Is they had him. They had Bertarame. And he flaked at the 11th hour.
But he was 15 million.
In theory, that's a better Cucho.
Yeah,
that's better than Cucho.
Have you seen what inflation? Have you seen what inflation's like?
What in his number?
Cucho was not a star before he came to Columbus. We keep acting like he was Ronaldo.
Hold on.
He was a bench player. But not good.
But he had 5+ goals in the Premier League and La Liga.
Jurgen Locadia-esque resume coming into
not have that.
Yes,
Locadia had 1 goal in Premier League,
and he had goals in the Bundesliga. Yeah.
Yeah, he had 1 goal in Bundesliga.
I think he had 5 goals in Bundesliga.
I would challenge that. I think.
Right, but also that assumes that there was absolutely no agency in scouting a player.
See, that
deciding whether a player is good or not. The crew picked 3 winners. 3 winners. Is that an accident?
No, they're very good at what they do, and it's very annoying. That's if this is just going to devolve into a debate.
Can we just not do that?
If this is going to devolve into a debate about whether or not the crew are good at their jobs, no, that's not a fun debate. Yeah. They are. They're very good.
Also, I want to push back on a couple of things here. Sure, since 2019, they've won 2 trophies. We've won 1, and one of their trophies was during COVID, which has a giant asterisk.
They won
over
2,
all of it.
Not just 2 trophies. 2 MLS Cups.
No. 2 trophies. Because if you're going to give them credit for making the finals of CONCACAF Champions Cup, I want credit for us making an Open Cup semifinal, which they have not done.
That's not a final. That's not a final.
I would give us credit for.
We made it further than they did. We beat them for the Supporter Shield last year. That's a trophy they didn't win.
Miami made 2 finals last year.
Great. They're a good club. They signed this fella named Messi. I don't know if you've heard of him before. Pretty good player there. Yeah, if we don't sign a Messi, I can be mad too.
They're still ahead of us without getting Messi most of the year.
That's fine. They also bent a lot of rules with Jordi Alba on a senior minimum and whatever else. So
but Crew made the final of CCL.
Sure.
They're still alive in
and
Leagues
they
Cup.
won the same amount of CCL titles as we did this year.
Yeah, great.
So my point is, this is not, oh my God, they're so much better than us. How can we not keep up? I think since Albright and Noonan have taken over, we have more than kept up, with the asterisk of saying the cup is better than the shield, which I am disappointed that you've abandoned that fight.
Here's a specific thing.
Okay.
Since Albright and Noonan took over, both teams have signed both teams have signed 2 DPs.
Okay.
We signed Obi and Bupenza. They signed Cucho and Rossi.
Okay.
Cucho and Rossi feels better.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. We've signed 3 DPs.
How dare you?
Yes, sir. Well, the other thing, too, is they didn't have Lucho Hernandez, or Lucho Acosta, sorry. They didn't have Lucho Acosta on the team when they took over. Like, they had more work. Like, Albright Noonan had... They sold him. They had to replace Zelarayan. Do you want us to have sold Lucho?
Won MLS Cup. And then they replaced him with a guy just as good.
The problem with this whole argument that you're making right here is that, yeah, they tried to do that. And the dude they tried to do that with flaked on him 48 hours into the window. And we don't have enough information.
Does that not reflect on your, like, is it just an accident?
I have no idea what
it's all an accident. It's like if you sign a good player or a bad player, it's just a whoopsie.
No, it's like
I have no idea. You do a good job or a bad job signing a good player or a bad player.
Like, I have no idea if Berterame was going to be good, but like I have a problem.
Was Nijkamp bad just by happenstance, or was he bad because of the players he chose?
He was bad because he didn't understand MLS roster rules and had absolutely no comprehension of what all these numbers were that were on the spreadsheet. He was just like, put a player here and some nerd will figure it out.
If just anybody could do something, like, why don't we just take the team over?
It's a very bad idea if the 3 of us took the team over.
I agree.
So here's the thing.
I agree because I think it takes skill.
It was the correct move to target this player. I think he's a good player. I think he's somebody that could have been an absolute difference maker on this team and in this league. And it was the correct effort. It was the correct price point. And by all accounts, everything was going in the right direction. All I can do is judge what they were doing and their effort. Look, if you've lined up a perfect bullseye at a target, well, your weapon of choice, bow and arrow, air rifle, whatever. You've lined up a target at some considerable distance. Everything is perfect. You've measured the wind. You know exactly what you have to do. By the time you squeeze the trigger, and somebody moves the target. And now you have not hit the bullseye. Did you take a bad shot? That's the question.
Was Rossi not available when we signed Bupenza?
I don't know. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was not available to them.
They fucked up with Bupenza. Like,
I will say, since we've signed Bupenza, the Crew have won MLS Cup, and they are very likely to win 1 or 2 or 3 more trophies.
I don't know if LAFC is as good as we say.
Or maybe not.
Yeah, I wouldn't put Crew ahead of either of the LA teams at this point. So, I mean, we've always said we're a process-oriented podcast. My biggest problem with the process is that this felt like a window you had to do business in. I don't believe in there's always next year. I don't believe in there's always this winter. The time to win is now. And I feel like the team missed the fierce urgency of now. That if that Berterame deal is falling apart, you need to send someone down and add another 0 to the paycheck, or do whatever it takes to make his family happy, or get the deal across the line. Or if you're after Josh Sargent and you genuinely believe Josh Sargent is worth $20 million or 20, then at some point you've got to go to ownership and say, look, like, the value of getting him in here right now is worth whatever that extra spend is. And I'm just not going to pocket watch for a billionaire. I'm just not going to do it. And it's a DP.
I just don't think Josh Sargent is better than like, you know, James Rodriguez or Memphis Depay, who are available on freeze and potential. Like, I don't know, maybe they kick the tires and they just said they'd rather not make any money than make $12 million to play in Cincinnati. I don't know.
Maybe they're really into crypto. They wanted to be paid in Bitcoin.
It's wild.
So I think,
but I will say that, because I know that there's people on the verge of tears right now. I do think that, like, if it did come down to, like, literally there was no deal to be done, and as reported, Albright got the Nico deal done in like 24 hours. Hell of a job.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah. Hell of a deal.
I mean, getting anything across the line quickly, tough. Getting someone, I guess, who had MLS experience that you didn't need to give up GAM for, which I don't know how much of that we have at this point. Great. With Joe Aquini, I looked at the numbers. I don't know what we're going to get from him, because he was been god awful in places he's been. Seems like he was pretty effective in St. Louis. If he can do anything that helps this team from the striker room, awesome. I just don't know that I'm expecting much from him, given the fact that he just couldn't see the field last year in Serie B, which is a little bit of a red flag to me. But, you know, if he can score a couple of big goals and impact some games down the stretch, it's certainly, if it was a choice between that and nothing in the roster spot, you'd certainly rather have something in the roster spot. I guess just sort of like to put a bow on it is that I would assume your feelings about the FC at this point are very much that this is kind of the same team that started the year now at this point.
Yeah.
That, like, you know, you have a designated player on paper that is in the striker room who, you know, you don't know what you're going to get out of him. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. You've got a strong back line that's anchored by two very high TAM players who are very, very good. And then you've got the rest of the roster, and it's all about, can this group stay healthy? Because the depth is not great anywhere on this team. The Columbus Crew, they went and they got depth. We didn't get a lot of depth here. We got players who, and the depth we did get was in the striker room, where, you know, maybe you would have liked to have seen something happen in the midfield to try and help some of the midfielders out. But the vibe check on this team is, did you like this team at the start of the year? And did you think that the run this team went on when it climbed up to first place in the Supporters Shield, do you think that's the team? Or do you think the team is what we've seen over the last like 10 or so games against MLS competition, where this team's 5-5 and seems more middle of the pack? And, you know, you don't have to go back and listen to the episode we did midweek, but one of the most salient points that was made on there, don't do it. One of the most salient points that was made on there is that the other thing about this team is Lucho Acosta healthy?
Yep.
If Lucho Acosta is healthy, then this team is capable of going out and beating any team in the league. Now, are they going to win a best of 10 series against any team in the league? They might not, against a team like a Columbus or an LA or a Miami, but they're capable of beating any of them on any night of the week if Lucho Acosta is healthy, even with the depth issues. And can the rest of the lineup stay healthy? So that's kind of, it's why I wish there was a game this weekend.
Yeah.
I wish that we had seen this team play. I wish we got a vibe check on where Acosta's at. I wish we got a vibe check on where the rest of this team is. And yeah, they exit the window back to level.
I do think that this team could beat anybody in MLS. Like if Acosta gets healthy and you have your best 11, yeah. Like, I think this team can take anybody on. will they do that if the game doesn't go exactly perfect? If they give up a kind of shitty early goal, I don't know. Does Nico feel as dangerous as even a Christian Ramirez? I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I think the team still can be really good.
Yeah,
and is really good. You know,
yeah.
If healthy,
yeah.
Could it be better? Sure. But we can't redo the window, and we can't make Bertarame sign with us. So
No.
ultimately, how do you evaluate the window? It's they replaced Miazga with a player who seems to be able to do the job, and they added a striker who I think does, all things being equal, improve the striker room. Whether that's enough is to be seen.
Yeah.
And then the article about the players that they, tried to sign or whatever. I don't think anybody questioned the team's ambition.
I think the question was just the idea of whether or not
did they do the right things,
or was their ambition placed in the right spots?
Yeah, and we'll find out.
Yeah. And the thing too is that a lot of this stuff, it's going to be unknowable until we get to the playoffs, and there may come a point in these playoffs where you sit and you actively wish that they had done something more in this window. Maybe you don't. Maybe this team plays well, but to me, the vibe going out of this window is, I hope to God that the team that shows up on the other side of Leagues Cup is better than the one that went into it. I hope to God Lucho Acosta is healthy. And the thought has crossed my mind multiple times that they could have signed Sargent, they could have signed McKinney, they could have signed Bertarame. If Lucho's not healthy, I still don't think any of those players are the type of player that fixes this team. And maybe that's something to address, that needs to be addressed in a future window, is that this something that helps this team be a lot less Lucho dependent. But the other part that was dropped in that Bogart article is that apparently the plan is to go to a 2 DP setup next year, which I hate, just fundamentally hate.
I don't want to go into that. I think it might be fine. We'll see. I think we should talk about next year's roster when we get into next year.
Yeah. Yep. We'll deal with that then.
But I do think that it's maybe with the injuries they've had, they were never going to win a trophy this year, and it just made sense to focus on next window. But
I don't think that. I mean, they were so close to signing Bertarame. I don't think that was ever. I think the plan was to do something this window. I don't think that there was any thought of we'll wait. Better luck next window. They were obviously the front office. They obviously believe they have a shot to win right now and this year.
And I love that.
Yep. All you can ask.
And I think that if they don't win a trophy this year was a failure.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they weren't ambitious. That doesn't mean that we should stop following the team.
It doesn't mean they're bad at their jobs either.
It doesn't mean they're bad at their jobs. They just
failed. Yeah.
They just failed. And honestly, you fail. If you're an ambitious team, you probably fail more than you succeed. Yeah. I don't think any team wins more trophies. I haven't done the numbers in MLS, but I don't think any team wins more of the trophies than there are opportunities to win trophies.
Yeah,
the good thing is that just
I don't think a win. I guess there's 4 or 5 trophies you could win every year. I don't think any team wins 2-3 trophies a year
every single year.
Every single year, yeah. And
this isn't this isn't a pro rel league where one team just dominates year after year.
Yeah. So when I say you failed, I don't mean pack it in, right? It's just you didn't do it that year.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what they do next year.
Yeah. We'll save
I'm
next
not.
year for next year.
No.
Chief is not
I'm
excited for next year.
Just this year. I don't care about. I've never,
But I
never
mean,
in my
like,
life.
if they
I don't have
don't
any
do it this
Oh my
retirement
God,
year,
let me
savings.
move on.
What I mean is, if they don't do it this year, I'm excited to see what they do next year.
Sure.
I don't save
sure.
for retirement. It's all about right now, baby.
It's terrifying. All right, let's go on over to part 3. We've got Patreon questions. Boy, we owe some people some questions here. This will be a fun one. All right, we are back. We've got Patreon questions. Again, if you want to support us, which I don't know why you would, but a couple of people out there want to. You can find us on Patreon. You can search for The Post Cincy or find a link down in the description of this episode. You can give us a couple bucks a month, and it helps keep the lights on here over at The Post. And in exchange for doing that, you get to ask us a question. David Mernon asks, and we're going to go ahead and refund him his question, and he can ask us another question. Will Bupenza be around until the end of 2025? No.
Don't think so.
I'm going to go ahead and say no.
In the world of soccer, that's
I
up
also
for
might
debate.
say. I also might say
I think
no.
he will be alive. I do think he will be like living and breathing by the end of
That's
2025.
really good to hear. Brock Bermel asks, you only get to pick between being at the Olympics or the World Cup. Which one are you choosing to go to?
Depends which one I have better tickets for.
I like this question. Let's assume you have a ticket to a high-profile event. Let's say a semifinal for a World Cup and like the 100-meter dash for Olympics.
Probably the World Cup. I don't know.
Yeah, World Cup.
I mean, it's very stereotypical for the soccer podcast to pick the World Cup. But
So
yeah.
in general, I think the World Cup, because the World Cup is done like in a country across like cities.
Right.
But like the Olympics, you got like all the stuff is happening in one city.
Right.
That's like too much.
All right, let's put it this way then to make this a little more
Like
interesting.
I'll go to a game in like Kansas City or whatever.
If I could have any Olympic ticket I want,
Sure, yeah.
I might take the Winter Olympics if I could have hockey.
Ooh.
Olympic hockey is incredible.
A gold medal game would be fun.
Yeah.
I
Gold
think
medal Olympic hockey.
for me, it's that the Olympics seem to be, and again, I've not been to either one, so I could be completely wrong here. My impression is the Olympics tends to be a very home crowd centric crowd. And so like if there's a French swimmer in like the 8th lane or whatever in swimming, they get hyped as hell for that guy. But he's probably not winning or whatever. But like it's all based around the local person with plenty of international travel. But the World Cup feels more international. That like Ecuador versus Switzerland in the World Cup is going to be almost a split stadium of 40,000 Ecuadorians and 40,000 Swiss cheering for the club. That feels more interesting to me.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that like a lot of these Olympic events, they're kind of low energy
Yeah.
a little bit. And there's a lot of downtime between what's going on in these individual events as they reset. The next competitor gets up. You go to the gymnastics event and like there's 5 people competing all at the same time. You got to sort of figure out where you want to look at. I know it's stereotypical. Soccer podcast picks World Cup. I would go World Cup.
Yeah.
But I would also I kind of like to see some good teams play. Like if you're telling me it's the World Cup and my tickets are for like Iran versus, I don't know, like Qatar or some shit like that.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'll pass.
I'll say definitely the allure is off of an American World Cup. Not that I don't want to go, but just like it'd be more fun to go to like Brazil or Germany or something. Okay. Ian Rexroad asks us, what's a fun fact about the FC that isn't actually true, but feels true, and you could probably convince someone without much effort? I like this question.
I have one for you.
Please.
FC Cincinnati's first 2 DPs were Fernando Adi and Fatai Alashe.
That is good.
Feels true.
Oh, man. Fatai Alashe, I think, had a cup of coffee in USL after us and then retired. So, damn.
Such a big deal when he
was
signed,
not a
too.
DP.
He was definitely not a DP.
You could definitely convince people.
You could definitely convince people, yeah.
What's another fun fact you could make up? Oh, I mean, a pretty obvious one is that FCC won USL title at any point.
USL Cup,
or USL Cup. Sorry,
yeah.
They won the Eastern Conference title and the overall regular season. I don't know what they call it. The USL Shield equivalent. I don't know.
Or here's one.
Here's one that they won 3 wooden spoons.
Oh, nice.
That's good. What about that they beat Inter Miami in their run to the U.S. Open Cup semis?
Ooh, that is good. Not very many people.
As opposed to the Miami FC.
The Miami FC. FC Cincinnati, the only team to win a title in the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st division. We did not.
The Lion has always been called Gary, even in the USL era.
Ooh, that's good.
Like an alternate history of just the team right here. Just gaslighting an entire audience into believing something's true.
The team has always been supportive of like Pride Month.
Real ones remember Equality Night.
Equality Night.
A celebration of equal equality among all people.
Right. So vague.
JD Vance knew that there was a team before last year.
Shocking that Carl hasn't invited him out to a game yet.
You could probably gaslight people into thinking that like somebody like Barry Larkin has pulled the sword.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Some fake sword pullers. Who's a good fake owner you could add? That Nick Lachey. Nick Lachey is a part owner of the club. George Clooney's a part owner of the club.
Yep.
Okay. Harrison Hensley asks, which non-soccer, it's a good caveat, Olympic sport, summer or winter, would individual FC Cincinnati players be best at?
I think we already did this.
Did we?
If we didn't, I'm going to go ahead and say, I bet Lucho Acosta is a great fencer.
I think I literally said that in the last episode I was on.
I do not remember this
conversation. I don't recall this at all. Are you doing like episodes in your home when we're not around?
I swear to God, I said that Lucio Acosta would be good at fencing.
I have no memory of this, but I'm really glad you both came to
this
conclusion.
I agree.
He would drunkenly talk about this in New York or something?
He has incredible vision, and he'd be able to like kind of worm his way in there.
He's small too. I assume that's an advantage in fencing.
Yeah. All right. Next question.
Whoa.
They paid $2 for this question. They can at least get like 3 players.
We already answered it twice.
I refuse to accept that we've answered this question. Then what were the other answers?
I don't know.
Pavel Buka at weightlifting, obviously.
Power lifter.
Obviously.
Who would be the best shooter? It's got to be Luca or Shano is good at shooting.
The sharpshooter. Yeah. What about like you wonder like who's good at the equestrian events, like the horse dancing shit, the dressage?
So here's the problem.
Yeah, no, the Japanese horses. Everybody knows this.
He loves cowboys. We do know this. The Olympics has a ban on non-human propelled vehicles, which is why like auto racing isn't a part of the Olympics, which feels like it probably should have been. But here's the thing. How does that not apply to horses?
They're not they're not human propelled. They're horse propelled.
Well,
I'm just saying that
okay, hold on.
They're also not vehicles.
Well, then I need the horse to be from the country that is competing.
I agree. I think the
horse should get the medal too. I don't think the rider should get the medal.
Oh yeah, the horse should get the medal.
Yep.
It's just like in horse racing. Here
is something. If we answered this question before, I know we didn't do it this way because I would have remembered this.
Okay.
If you had to pick one FC player to win the breakdancing gold medal, who's winning it?
Oh,
Sergio.
Oh, Sergio's good.
Did you see that slide Kip Keller had when he thought he scored that one goal?
No, Sergio. I'm telling you, it's going to be Sergio.
Yamil Assad.
There's no doubt in my mind that it's Sergio.
It's Yamil Assad because Assad is full of surprises.
I don't care. It's Sergio. It's Sergio.
Sergio would do
100%
good
it's Sergio.
in the first round, blow out his knee. Yamil Asad wins the next 2 rounds.
No. Sergio would break your mind.
Would there be anyone on the team that loses to Ray Gun though?
No, there'd be not a single person. Actually,
Matt Miazga would lose.
Haglund.
No, Haglund would make up for it with enthusiasm.
Haglund would do like exactly the Ray Gun set.
If Pat Noonan and Ray Gun had to have a dance off, who wins?
Pat
Noonan would murder Ray Gun.
Pat Noonan,
But
at the very
Pat
least,
Noonan would be
he's
scowling
athletic.
the entire time. Like,
But he is athletic. He's
Pat
known
Noonan,
athletic.
Pat Noonan would beat Ray Gun. Pat Noonan would beat Ray Gun and then murder Ray Gun.
for forcing the competition to happen.
for forcing him to waste his time on this
He'd
nonsense.
be like, I thought there wasn't a meeting.
Okay, Scott Wilson asks a good question. When will we finally have a woman pull the sword, and who will it be other than Rose Lavelle?
We haven't had a woman pull the sword.
Name a woman.
According to
That feels like a bit.
according
That's not
to
true.
Scott
You
Wilson.
tell me we haven't had a woman pull the sword?
No, we had didn't we have like Jeff and Jen from Q102
that
pull the sword?
barely counts.
How dare you? They're a beloved morning show duo.
Did Jeff pull the sword though? That could be the tiebreaker here.
I don't remember. I never pay attention when the sword gets pulled.
Sarah Jessica Parker should pull the sword.
Carmen Electra.
We're just
Carmen
gonna
Electra should pull
We're just
the
going to
sword.
name all of the women that are tangentially related to Cincinnati. This feels like growing up and reading the Inquirer. It's like, hey, they had a hotel room here once. They're Cincinnatians.
That's all I got.
Why can't Meg pull the sword? Oh,
Heather
I'll tell you-
Mitz?
okay, I got it.
Heather Mitch should pull the sword.
Not Heather Mitz. All right,
She should pull the sword.
because if she pulls a sword, she's gonna decide somebody is like a child trafficker in like a nearby row and just like stab them.
It's a blunt sword.
I'll tell you the sword pulling. When they announce the NWSL team, you have Meg pull the sword.
Oh.
Is it like a gender reveal where she pulls the sword and all of a sudden like the NWSL color smoke pops out?
Fine.
The gender
Fine,
reveal party for a soccer team is really funny.
We have a ladies team.
Cleveland could do this, actually. What kind of team do we got? It's a USL championship team.
You know where the players do the whole thing where we celebrate, like they put the ball under their shirt to show like, oh, I have a birth announcement. They should do, like, if you score a goal while your wife is pregnant on a soccer team, give the smoke to the Bailey of the proper color and do the gender reveal that way.
They should do that. Yeah,
That would be
That would be
really
electric.
funny. I really like that.
that would be Carmen Electric.
Boo.
That's horrid.
This is a good one. Matt Barry, probably not the fantasy football guy, asks,
Phoenix, Arizona.
since the Santos Laguna match, I have been to more games at TQL than Nippert.
Jackie Daytona.
Is there anything you miss at Nippert that you wish was at TQL Stadium? That's a good question. Anything at Nippert that you wish we could bring over to the Teak?
John Harkes.
Should pull the sword, not a woman though. But
Well, John Harkes was at Nippert. He's not at TQL.
You know, I'm a little callback to our Paul Walters interview. I miss the high school kids on the field taking PKs, the teams. I think they should expand that to like almost like a Family Feud thing where like corporations can send 5 people, but you have to actually watch them try to shoot PKs. I think that would be great. Watching like middle-aged accountants attempting to score PKs at midfield.
Is the reason why we don't do anything because they don't want to damage the turf?
It can't get any worse. Okay, so a real answer to this, what I do miss is behind the Bailey, they used to have a restaurant that served chicken tenders and fries for like $6. That was fantastic. That was awesome.
Yeah. It was definitely easier to get into Nippert without a ticket.
Yeah, there is that.
I
I wish we
Next
would have had
question.
I wish we would have a final game at Nippert. I wish there would have been like a final send off. But like
Yeah,
the team was dog shit and there was a pandemic, so like I understand why, but would have been cool.
The size, it's hard to beat the size. 35,000, 40,000, man. It could have been really fun.
They tried to buy it.
They did try to buy it. Okay, this will be our last question. This is a good one to end on. Sean Burmer asks, you randomly appear in the following fictional universes as yourself, just some regular ass dude. How long do you survive? Here are the universes. Game of Thrones, 28 Days Later, Shrek.
You have to answer for every universe?
I think the question is how long would you last in each of these universes? Game of Thrones, I will assume I've lived longer than I would have.
No, hold on. So it's just me, like it's dropping you into this universe.
Bloop. Yeah.
I have no skills that would permit me to survive in the Game of Thrones universe. Like,
yeah.
Famously, you don't see a lot of litigation happening to solve problems in Game of Thrones.
I think that actually makes you more likely to be killed the second you try to litigate or even mediate something.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm not surviving very long in Game of Thrones. I'd give myself like, if you dropped me in a city and assuming I could speak the language, a couple months, maybe a year or two.
Contract a disease and then die. That would be
good.
Like
some horrendous, like you cut yourself doing something and you die of an infection. Like,
yeah, that feels right. Or you get drafted into some army and
right, and they kill people that look like me.
So it's Game of Thrones, 28 Days Later, or what?
Shrek, the animated movie.
I feel like I could survive in Shrek. I feel I'd be okay
there. Do a lot of
there.
people die in Shrek?
I can't think of a single
I'm not sure I've seen a Shrek. Are there any deaths in Shrek?
Sure, somebody dies. It's a kid's movie.
I've seen all of them. I can't think of anybody dying.
I will tell you, I will not do any villainy in Shrek. Does that help me or hurt me?
Well, I mean, I think you have to kiss ass to the villain. I think in any of these universes, you immediately have to side with the villain, but not do any villainy stuff.
So first and third, I will kiss ass.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
So you're good with the dude that runs in Shrek. What's the little dude's name? That's John Lithgow.
I don't care. I've not seen
a
Shrek. Game of Thrones, I think I would do fine.
Okay.
No. Like I would just...
You wouldn't. They don't have natural wine in Game of Thrones.
Fine. I would just go to like a little pub or whatever and just be like, yeah, I got, I got the hair. I'm a Targaryen blood.
Being blonde is helpful here.
Yeah, it's fine.
28 Days Later is the interesting one.
20 Days Later, I'm in the US, so I'd be okay.
But you're dropped in that universe.
Because I've seen 28 Weeks Later, and I know that there's no thing in the US.
There's no zombies in the US. Yeah. No, but if you're being dropped into the universe, I assume that means you're being dropped into the UK. I'm dropped into
the universe in Ohio in the US.
Allegedly, they're working on a 28 months later movie.
Yeah. So at least 28 months.
All right, I might want to revise my opinion on Game of Thrones.
I'd live at least 28 months.
I might be able to figure out something that would wow the locals.
Ooh.
Like with some like modern knowledge.
If
I'm dropped in there right there, do I have my iPhone on me? Because until the battery dies in that thing, I will look like a god.
You look for like a god for any of the stock apps that don't rely on a cell phone or data collection.
If the question is like, do I get dropped into like a cottage and there's a bunch of like 28 Days Later zombies around me?
Yeah, I would just 5 minutes. Right?
I would just lie down.
Right.
See, the problem with the 28 Days Later one.
I would just die.
The 28 Days Later one, the zombies run
I would just,
in that
like,
one.
Cross my heart. I just do a sign of the cross and die.
Be done. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what's the point?
That's how I feel about regular life too sometimes. I just run and run and run and I die anyway.
I'm gonna like murder people to like live. No,
this gets into this could be a longer conversation in the off season. I do think people that like enjoy zombie apocalypse stuff, they secretly just want to kill people. And this is like the one spot where it's socially acceptable to kill people.
I like zombie apocalypse stuff, but I also always think like, yeah, I would just like die.
I've made this joke plenty of times. It doesn't make any sense, but this is how I feel. If there's a zombie apocalypse happening, my plan is to join the team zombie, but I want to become a boss zombie. So I want to equip myself with like useful things for people to find on my body when I die.
I will say I have designed my life with the assumption that there is not a zombie apocalypse.
That's probably healthy.
If one came along, fair enough.
We got.
So you're telling me you don't have a bug out bag somewhere in your house?
No.
Did you ever watch that show, the Doomsday Preppers show that they used to have back in the day?
Like,
yeah, it was great. People are mentally ill, and there's just a camera following them around.
Look, I want to go skiing. I want to go to Europe. Like that. That's the way. Like I've designed my life. If the world comes along and there's like, and that's like not possible anymore. Well, it fine.
The world doesn't need me at that point.
Yeah, bad bet.
Look,
you tried to sign a DP.
You take things down to the end of the window, and it just the deal falls apart there. It happens.
Chief, I've got a show I would recommend for you. If I didn't think you've already seen it before, have you ever seen the Discovery Channel show The Colony?
I have not.
So this was great. They did a second season, which I cannot vouch for because I've never seen it. But the first season is great. It was a reality show where they took a bunch of people from a wide variety of backgrounds and they had them live in a post-apocalyptic Los Angeles. And they hired all these actors to do like be scavengers and to raid their encampment and stuff. But they all had to like build a little community in an abandoned warehouse. And they had to figure out how to jerry-rig generators, and they had to go scavenging for food. It was amazing. I think you'd really like it.
People forget about the Biodome back when I was growing up. The Biodome was really hot.
Pauly Shore movie?
No, there was an actual there's the Biosphere. Biodome was the Pauly Shore movie.
Pauly Shore and Stephen Baldwin and
no, it had an all-star lineup. We're not
Gugino movie.
There was the Biosphere where they built something like that people tried to live in, and then Biodome was based on the Biosphere. Like they tried this, it didn't work out well.
We just decided not to do that. I'm sorry. Like it's, like some people bet on living in civilization. Some people don't. Like,
this is one of the better $2 questions, incidentally. This is job well done. Who wrote this one? This is fantastic.
Who wrote that question? That question came to us from Sean Bermer. So
good job, Sean. I like that.
That was a good one. With that, Chief,
let's do one more question.
Ooh, you want one more question? Oh my God, Grayson can't get enough. Oh, I already answered that one. From KP, if you were part of the colonization of Mars, which sports equipment would you take with you? I.e., a mitt and baseball bat, a football, a Nerf football, foosball table, Quidditch equipment, etc. I'm glad Quidditch got included there.
I mean, there's a lot of sports you're just not
problematic. Problematic to include Quidditch.
That's a good point.
I assume the person who asked the question is not a bigot, so I assume it's just a oversight. But
very nice of you to make that assumption of one of our patrons.
I'll give them the benefit of the doubt.
The sport isn't bigoted, just the author. The sport is fine.
That's
a good point. I have a.
I'm sure the guy that invented basketball had problematic takes back then.
I'll tell you what I bring.
Promise you he did.
Tell you what I bring. I'd bring pickleball.
Oh,
pickleball's a hell of a choice, actually.
It's not a real sport. It's not real.
No, it's not. It's fun though. I'm told.
I'm also told it's fun.
How would pickleball roll in because what is Mars? Mars is like 1/3 gravity of Earth.
It doesn't matter.
Well, it does matter.
It's not a real sport. It doesn't matter. Like you just sit there and you're just like.
Baseball would be fun in low gravity though.
Yeah, but the problem with baseball is you have to have you're obviously in some sort of a habitat. So you're really going to build a habitat that's big enough to play baseball in.
Right.
So my
Pickleball's nice. Pickleball's like confined. So like golf is out.
Oh, we'll bring yelling at each other about the transfer window.
Oh, that's a
That's
fun
the sport that I would bring.
That's a fun sport.
That takes no space. That takes no space, no skill, no intelligence.
Chief, if you're fine with bunkers, golf's a hell of a pick because you could just play it across the
simulator?
entire surface of. Oh
No.
Just the whole planet is your golf course there.
Yeah, but like a spacesuit is really going to screw with your backswing, I feel like.
Well, it's not going to be perfect.
No, like golf might be the right answer. You can put it in the simulator and you can play every course on Earth or on Mars that you want to design. That would be cool. If you can bring the golf simulator, that might be my choice right there. Because that's endless amounts of fun right there.
My annoying answer is esports, so I'm just going to bring a gaming PC and we'll be all right.
Like you know what the lag is going to be playing against someone on Earth?
Very frustrating.
My sport
I'm bringing
be
foosball. I would beat anybody in foosball.
Ooh. Grayson, are you good at foosball? You are good at foosball.
Yeah, he is good at foosball.
I learned that in Columbus.
I'm really good at foosball.
That's right.
I'd beat anybody at foosball.
I don't. Yeah,
golf simulator is the right answer on this space. You know what would be fun is like just bring some AI to populate a fake Twitter so that I could just go online and argue with people.
There was somebody sent me a link to that. There's a social media. Damon sent me a link to that. There's a social media site starting up that offers you that same ability. You're the only human, and it's all populated by AI.
You just fight with people.
Yeah, or whatever.
Do they have soccer takes?
Maybe, but you interact with a whole universe of AI.
You would lose though.
That's what they should do with like actual.
If there was like a soccer take thing, you would lose.
It would be really funny because you'd be like, I actually think Matt Niaz is good. And it would just spit out a trillion stats explaining why he's bad. Like, oh, shit. Okay.
That should be the punishment if you're bad at Twitter, is that they should send you to the other Twitter where it's just social media bots. It's like AI bots and you're arguing with no one.
I have said this forever, that the shadow ban is not to cut them off from the rest of the world. Yeah, it's to put them in a fake environment so they think they're interacting with humans.
This is how they dealt with Professor Moriarty on Star Trek, is they just siloed him off into his own little personal universe.
Yeah, you could be a little dictator over here where you can't hurt anybody.
Yeah.
All right, Chief, I think that's going to do it for this episode. We went very long for an episode that has absolutely nothing to be talked about.
You know, we're working through feelings here. Give a shout out, though, before we leave. Jim Trace and the Makers, saw them at Radio Artifact at Urban Artifact on Friday. If you go online to Radio Artifact, they have the full stream of the show they had on Friday night. Phenomenal. It's a multi-camera recording, professional soundboard recording. They sounded great. They're always a good time. They're the music for our podcast. Give them a listen. Give them a stream. You'll have a lot of fun because the show was really, really good. So I wanted to make sure I shouted that out. They're good people. Thank you for letting us use your music. And go fuck yourself, San Diego.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Cincy Postcast. It is a production of The Post Cincy. You can check us out at thepostcincy.com or just click a link in the description to check out some of our written work. It also has links to our social media accounts across all sorts of different platforms, including YouTube, where we are trying to do more and more video content. Please, dare I say it, like and subscribe and leave a comment. But no, that would be really, really helpful. Also want to give a thank you to Jim Trace and the Makers. They're a local Cincinnati band who provided all of the music for this episode. We love having them on board. You can check them out. Again, link in the description of this episode to find out where they might be playing shows next or where you can listen to more of their music. Also want to give a massive, massive thank you to the awesome and very attractive patrons over on Patreon. It is a voluntary subscription that people take out with no real promise of anything extra that keep this show afloat. And we are so, so thankful to those of you that have decided to take that commitment. If you do like the show, or at least just want to engage with other people who have listened to the show and want to talk about FC Cincinnati, MLS, soccer, or really anything else, you can go on over to Discord. Again, link in the description. Lots of links in the description where you can find a link to the Discord. That's where we are keeping the conversation going 24/7. It feels like it's a really fun group of people in there just talking about FC Cincinnati. And like I said, just about everything else. And finally, I'll say it. If you liked this episode, and given the fact that you've made it all the way to the end, I have to assume you either like it or for some reason cannot reach the stop button. Please share this episode with a friend or family member or someone who likes FC Cincinnati. The best way for us to grow is from a personal recommendation from somebody who likes it. And if that's you, please tell other people. And if you don't have any friends, feel free to give us a review on whatever your podcast platform of choice is. We'll take anything we can get. But again, a huge, huge thank you to everybody for listening to this show. I am blown away that anybody listens to this. So again, I well and truly mean this. Thank you so much for listening.